Hello, I'm Chris Moon, recovering and perpetual artist manager, and I'll be your guide through tough love, adventures in artist management. For today's episode, we chat with Keith Hagan, a longtime manager who has worn many different hats within his career in music, including stints at record labels, as a publicist, and ultimately coming together in artist management. Keith takes a very strategic approach with his artists, which allows for a lot of creativity and intent within their careers. We cover a lot of different topics in this conversation, and I hope you can join us, so let's dig in.
Greetings and salutations. I am Keith Hagan, VP of Management over at MNRK Music Group. Also a native New Yorker. That counts for something.
Yeah, I would say so. Well, thanks for joining us today.
Of course.
Yeah. And I'll have to say, until you mentioned it the other day, I didn't know exactly how to pronounce, or the way you guys utilize the
MNRK.
Right.
Yeah,
but I was like, that's great. Love it. I was thinking the MN, Minnesota. I didn't quite have the articulation around Monarch, but yeah, I love it. It's really great.
We're not a Twin Cities company, but we do have offices all over the globe. So we're going to work on our Minnesota office.
Yeah, we have a small little music scene going on here. It's not too bad.
I would say so.
Definitely off the beaten path for sure. But yeah, great to chat today for sure. So I always like to start with how you started getting into this like insane business. Everybody's path's a little different, and usually as managers we try a bunch of different things along the way. So tell us a little bit about where your story begins.
Well, I'll give you kind of my my elevator pitch. When I'm sort of talking to folks, explaining who I am. I give the Cliff's Notes version of my career, and then you can dissect it any way you like. But I got my start, interning, and I worked at a lot of record labels. So I started at CBS Records, then I went to IRS, Chrysalis, EMI. Those were all internships, and I was interning mostly in the PR departments. At CBS, I actually worked at in the college department.
Oh, cool.
And then I don't think we've talked about this. I actually started my own fanzine in college.
Oh, wow.
Did that for 4 years. I went to college at Ohio University. My 4-year trip to the Midwest. And did that, and then, graduated from college, started a job. I was at Arista Records for 2 years. And I tell you some funny stories about that. And then from there I went to Mammoth Records, and I was at Mammoth for about 7-8 years or so.
Okay, that's a good run.
And then it got pulled into Hollywood, and then I kind of was like, I think I'm done. I want to get out. And then I went to an independent PR company called PFA Media, where I was the general manager, and I was there a good 8 years or so. And then from there, started my own management PR company with a partner, had that for about 12 years, dissolved that, started to do my own thing, which didn't last very long because Monarch came calling, and I really hit it off with the head of the company, Chris Taylor, and just all the upper management here, and decided to kind of, hitch my wagon to Monarch, and now I've been here. I've been here about a year and a half or so.
Nice.
So there's the Cliff's Notes for you. There's a lot to dissect there. But that's the short of it.
Yeah. So I'm curious, when you were interning in college and you went to college in Ohio, were you like spending time in New York then during his internships? I'm just curious.
I lived here, right? So literally every break I came back, winter break, summer break, anything, I immediately was back at whatever record label I was at. Gotcha. And I did it. I actually interned at different labels intentionally because I wanted to see sort of like, okay, this is CBS, which became Sony. I want to see how this major operates. And then I went to IRS because I really liked the label and was a big Miles Copeland fan. I wanted to see what was going on over there. And then, Chrysalis was sort of a medium-sized label, and then back to another major with EMI, which was at the time Charles Koppelman and Daniel Glass and all those cats. But so it was all by design where I was going. I was fortunate enough that people actually wanted to, I guess, they wanted to have me in and hire me, right? But,
yeah, no, that's awesome. I think, interning is such a key component to like finding your way, I think, initially in the music industry. What was your degree in?
I was a telecommunications major, but to be honest with you, it didn't, like, the whole time I was in college, I literally was like, day one, I said, okay, I've done this internship at CBS. How do I keep in touch with record labels while I'm in college?
Yeah.
And the immediate answer for me, because at the time I was interested in PR, I didn't segue into management till later on, was, oh, well, if I'm running my own fanzine, I have to call all these record label departments. And that's how I formed friendships with everybody. And that's how I got my internships.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's super smart.
Yeah.
What was the name of your fanzine?
Oh, God. It was called The Slicing Edge, which was like a terrible ripoff of The Cutting Edge, which was that IRS record show that they had on MTV. It was a total like hack job. But, but at one point, I had 100 people at one point volunteering for the fanzine, and we got it statewide for a minute. It was held in, hold on just one second.
Oh, sure.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
At one point, we got it statewide. It was in all the record stores in Ohio for quite some time. And, and it was cool because like the whole purpose of the fanzine for everybody, like the guy who was the number 2 there, this guy, Ben Gray, who I'm still friends with, he wanted to become a professional photographer. Oh. So every time there was a show coming through, we got him photo passes, and he like got this crazy, he was photographing Stevie Ray Vaughan and anybody coming through anywhere, he was there, and he was able to build up this incredible book for himself by the time he got out of college.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really great. Yeah. What obviously it was partly probably due to the internships you had, but and opportunities, but what really beyond the zine, what kind of pulled you into the PR world? Like what was it that kind of appealed to you there? I mean, PR, public relations, press, I guess. I mean, it was a whole different world back during that time frame, I would imagine, than what it is largely now. But just curious to know kind of like what what was your touch points around your interest there?
You know what it was for me, honestly? I mean, that first internship I did at CBS Records, it was part PR, radio, retail. I was around every aspect of the company, and I just found PR to be the more entertaining bit at the time, where I was like, oh, okay, I can help craft these pitches and, really march down the field with trying to help this artist with their career. So it was a natural gravitation for me, where by the time I got to, IRS and Chrysalis and EMI, I was straight up interning in the PR departments. I knew where I wanted to go. And, by the time I graduated college, you'll like this, actually, this was my infuriating bit of my career, where my dream job back then was Atlantic Records, because I was a big Ahmet Ertegun fan.
Sure.
Right. And like, you look at what Atlantic used to sign, Rockwise, R&B, et cetera, et cetera. And I had this interview with these 2 wonderful women, one of which I'm still friends with. It was Susan Swan and Maria Malta, and they brought me in to hire me as an assistant at Atlantic. And I had this amazing, and I was like, oh my God, I've got an interview with my dream job. This is incredible. And I walked out thinking, I got this. Like, I nailed that, did 4 years of interning. I know what I'm talking about. And they called me the following week, and they're like, we're not hiring you. And I was like, why? What did I do? And they're like, you're overqualified. And I'm like, hold on a second. So you're telling me I just put 4 years of hard work in to get what the job I wanted, and you're telling me I'm overqualified? And they're like, we're doing you a favor. You would be bored. Anyway, long story short, fast forward to when I finally I took a job at Mammoth Records a couple of years later, Mammoth was part of the Atlantic Records Group. And I immediately, within 2 years, was sort of on par with them, and the second I walked in the building, they're like, you see, we told you.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's such a that's still a hard thing to swallow in the moment, though. It reminds me.
It was crushing.
When I was in Nashville at Belmont University, I interned a lot, and definitely subscribed to that. But I was it was hard because this was early mid-90s. And there wasn't a lot of non-country or Christian, and I had no interest in working in that side of the industry. So on the heels of the success at Capitol with Garth Brooks, they started a non-country division and hired Kim Bowie to run it. And I got an interview for an internship there, and same thing. I was like, I got this. This is great. And I didn't get it. And, Kim and I,
what was their reasoning? Yeah.
I don't even really know. I mean, I could have probably just blown it. Maybe I was just a total freak being a little too excited.
Well, if Kim is listening, and I'm a Kim Bowie fan, shame on you.
Me too. No. I don't even know if she remembers that.
She's great. She's great.
She is great. But it was definitely one of those things where I was like, I thought I had this. Sometimes things just, don't go your way, but then it comes back around. Similarly, I also applied for a job. It was probably entry level. I don't even remember what it was for, at Rykodisc right out of college. And nothing ever happened with it. Followed up, never heard back. And then fast forward a year and a half later, I'm up there in the offices because they signed one of my artists. So I even
working with them because you're managing somebody there.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah.
And when we were going around meeting everybody, I was like, I'm going to talk to HR for a second. I was like, you have my resume on file still? I was like, I applied for a job here.
Yeah, you guys turned me down, and now I'm running stuff. God damn it! Yeah.
It was kind of funny though. It was kind of it was definitely a moment of okay, I'm on a better side of this probably ultimately.
Look, I think this like I do. This business can be so circular. You encounter people over and over again, and I'm grateful for that because I've worked with a lot of wonderful people. But I mean, there's been some duds in the bunch, and you're like, oh, you again? But okay,
Yeah. I would say that's one thing as the music industry progresses, in the direction that it is. It's a little bit more insular, and I think a lot of people that were just there for the fun of it, in the 90s when in the heyday, and maybe early 2000s. I mean, a lot of those people phased themselves out for one reason or another. Couldn't hack it, probably didn't like getting paid less and, shifting from job to job, maybe didn't have their heart in it. So most people left at this point that have come from that era, and still are here in it or, have a heart in it, makes a difference.
No, you're right. I mean, there were certainly plenty of people I encountered a lot when, my first real job was Arista. And you do the Clive Davis Grammy party and all that. And you could tell, who was sort of locked into what the work was and what was going on, and then who was trying to do celebrity sighting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say when I went to Belmont and I think I was a junior in high school, the guy who used to run it, Bob Malloy, who started the program there in the 70s, sat me down with my parents and said, you don't want to do this. And I was like, no, I really do. And he's like, no, you don't. It's really, it's really hard. You're not going to make any money. I mean, he did the hard non-sell. And I was like, nope, I'm in it. What can I read? What can I do? I'm here.
Right.
But I did really admire that. It was it kind of squashed all of the preconceptions of, oh, this is going to be fun. And it's no, not really. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I mean, the fun is when you're associated with a band, a project, or something that is having success, then you can kind of have a little hooray moment for 10 seconds, and then you gotta get back to work. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely. There's a lot of opportunity to enjoy. I mean, we are kind of spoiled going to shows all the time and heard music early on. And there's a lot of sexy elements to it, but it is, at the end of the day, it's work. In order to survive in this industry, as you very well know, I mean, it's just at some point you got to roll up your sleeves and just lean in.
Well, I feel like I've had to reinvent my career 2-3 times,
Yeah.
and it's like you make a decision on, am I in this or not? What do I want out of this? And for me, it was always, look, I got really interested in this when I was 15, 16, never looked back.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I can honestly say I didn't know what I wanted to do in music, but I knew I wanted to do something in music. And when I realized I wasn't a good enough player, to kind of go that route, and it just wasn't like, I'm a huge fan of music, but I like to sit on that side of the fence for the most part.
Me too. I never played anything. People are always like, were you in a band? And I was like, no. I was like, I was the kid who, when I was younger, was listening to records, and then all of a sudden was like, what's with these liner notes? Who are these people? What's going on? And then I started, I had a friend whose father used to get Billboard magazine. And I started reading Billboard, when I was like 12. And I was like, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was, it's like, you don't know, at that age, you're like, there's a whole business behind this. You just think, there's records. How do they exist? But,
right.
Yeah. Just kept diving. Now I'm, stuck in molasses. So.
Yeah. You do reach a point where there's no return really. But yeah. One of the things that I thought, that you mentioned earlier, I thought was interesting, and kind of leaning into the PR side of things, maybe more than anything else that you touched on, interning, college repping early on, is the fact that, as a PR person, you're essentially, you're crafting copy, you're telling stories. And I think really like one of the at the heart of management, hopefully you're a bit of a storyteller on behalf of your artist in a way. Maybe not as specific to that, but I mean, you have to craft, who is this artist? What are they about? It seems like, at least that's kind of like, it feels like might be some kind of common thread between your time working at labels, in PR, independently, but what was the tipping point to kind of get you into management?
Honestly, I think, I started to segue the management in the early 2000s. And at first, it was boredom. It was boredom with PR because, I had, at that point, I had done PR full time for quite some time. And it's like, there's only so many times you want to keep going back to the same well of like, boy, I wonder if Rolling Stone or Spin or Pitchfork or whomever is going to really care about this, this current project I'm working. And for me, I was more, because I had such a big view with all the labels I was working at with there, I was like, I'm more interested in the global aspects of a artist's career than I am just narrow band. And, I started to kind of pick up some early clients there and make that transition. It started when I was kind of at PFA. I started to manage a couple of bands on the side. And then when I eventually opened the other company I had, SKH, that was sort of, okay, I'm half management and I'm half PR, because, PR, as everybody knows, kind of keeps the lights on as far as getting paid in a prompt manner. But for me, it was always like, I want to segue out of PR. I think the last real full-time PR client I had, I was Kenny Rogers' publicist for the last 15 years of his life.
Oh, okay.
And that one, I obviously wasn't going to let go because there was a relationship there and I was really excited about the work. And, it's a different dynamic when you're dealing with somebody like that. And so I was like, okay, I'll keep that, but the focus for me was always more management. But it's just, I was more interested in the global scale of things and just working, as you said, like crafting the narrative for artists and crafting the strategy and really, look, there's plenty of people I work with. I definitely have a big, hand in, no, I think we should angle it this way, or I think these are the things we should talk about. I mean, it's a skill set that it comes into use with everything I do now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. For sure. Do you know Nick Stern? I imagine you probably know Nick, right?
Yeah. Nick was like myself, a reformed publicist, right?
Exactly.
Nick was I think Nick and I might have I think when he was at Atlantic, I was already gone from that system. But yeah, I know Nick was a publicist there for quite some time. I think he was an indie publicist too, and
Yep.
now doing quite well as a manager. So yeah, we have the commonality of going through the same transition, if you will.
Yeah, and I think he kind of retained and continued to do PR for Kid Rock after he was well into his management days.
There you go. Kenny Rogers. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Were you with Kenny when he did Bonnaroo, right?
Yeah. I was actually. Yeah, I was. I'll give you a funny one about that. I was with Kenny at Bonnaroo, and we had a bunch of writers trailing us because they wanted to interview Kenny. I think it was Spin, USA Today. This is now I'm really dating the whole thing, and a couple others, and they're like, "All right, we know Lionel Richie is here with Kenny, and we know they're doing something. We'd really love to interview the two of them." And I was like, "We're not going to do interviews. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you into the green room where Kenny and Lionel are, and you're just going to listen." And they're looking at me like I got 8 heads, and I was like, "Just trust me." So I mean, Kenny and Lionel were really close. They were really, really close. I mean, there's a whole long history that we would need another 3 hours of this podcast to tell you. But like when I brought the writers in, literally it was like you walked into the greatest comedy club of Kenny and Lionel just going at it with each other and jabbing each other and talking about the performance and talking about stuff. And I turned to the writers and I was like, "You get everything you need?" They're like, "Yeah, we got it." I was like, awesome. "Yeah." I was like, "You don't need to talk to them. Just listen to them. They're incredible."
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's amazing.
Lionel really, I mean, I've only met Lionel a handful of times with Kenny. Wonderful human being.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh man. Whew. Yeah, it's hard to know where to go from there. But well, so I guess ultimately as you were able to kind of lean in completely on the management side, how did that feel? You mentioned kind of like stepping away from the kind of retainer, project-based kind of components of PR. I mean, I think one of the deeper challenges of management is, you put time and investment into,
right.
A handful of artists, and quite often it takes a while to see that investment come to term.
Sure.
But, yeah, what did that look like for you when you kind of like step full 2 feet in?
I mean, I think that's why I think I had the PR thing as a component with my previous company for so while, because it was sort of the safety net, and then, as time went on, it was like, I don't necessarily need the safety net right now,
Gotcha.
and there's ebbs and flows with management and all that. But my heart wasn't in it anymore. I still like doing PR related activities if they're related to people I manage and work with. Then it's exciting for me, because then it's like, oh, okay, it's kind of, this is a big piece of the puzzle of what we're trying to do, and I can do hand-to-hand combat and have a good effect on this. So for me, that's exciting that I still keep these contacts up and deal with these people. And like, I mean, some of these people I've known for forever, and I just enjoy the company and talking with them. But yeah, it became with PR. I mean, especially when I was a label publicist, right? And it's, these records are coming down, and they're like, this is this week's priority, and this is this week's priority. And you'd listen to some of these records, and you're like, this record's not very good, and I have to go out and overly shuck and jive it, if you will. And I think there's there's a lot of publicists out there that will kind of do the overly heavy pitch, like everything they're pitching is the greatest thing ever. And I never treated PR that way with the outlets, because I was like, if I go in here claiming everything's the greatest thing, no one's going to take me seriously.
Right.
I need to be straight up about, this is why I think you should write on this for your audience. This is why I think this works for your outlet. And I need to be really, it has to come from a place of intelligence and really reading, I don't say reading the room, but figuring out, this outlet is trying to cover this. This is how my artist fits in. Let me go try to make this happen. But yeah, it just got, my heart wasn't in it anymore. And my heart was in trying to work on things on a global scale and be involved in every aspect of it. Of course the PR aspect, but the radio aspect, the marketing aspect, the touring aspect, all on down the line. That to me was entirely fascinating.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure any manager you have on here, anybody you talk to, it's like every day is a learning process. Every day you still pick up something new. Yeah. You're like, oh, I didn't know I could do it this way. Great. Let's try that. Maybe this will help this particular artist do what they've been trying to do. So every day is a new adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's one of the things I love most about management. I mean, every specialty within the music industry has its advantages and disadvantages, obviously, but and you might, a lot of people might view it as a challenge, and maybe a disadvantage, but the reality of it is, it's always different. Every artist is different. Every scenario is slightly different. You could riff on different ideas, but at the end of the day, everyone has to carve their own little path, and it's fun to play a role in that. So one of the things you mentioned in an interview that I was reading was just how you kind of view this management and working with your artists from a strategic level. And, we talk about that from time to time, on the management tip, but it's something that, there's a kind of like the proactivity, leaning in, laying back about it a little bit. But I mean, I think, especially in an environment today where there's no like clear cut way of like, oh, I'm going to get a video on MTV or a song on, this radio station, and it's going to open this thing up for me. It's like,
go after buzz bin rotation on MTV.
Exactly.
Instant gold like, record, right?
Yeah. I mean, I will say it seems like as the music industry has gotten more of a democracy and flat, it becomes even more challenging to kind of stand out within it, to grab enough attention to really, create hopefully a career. So from a strategic point of view with your artist, how do you approach that, knowing that that's kind of the reality and the challenge of the day?
Well, I think that's, as time marches on, right? It's like every 6 to 12 months, there's new factors you have to think about. And there's new things that need to be worked into your overall game plan. I mean, look, the fun thing for me is, okay, we have a blank canvas. Okay, whatever band has an album coming out, let's make sure we have the proper setup time. Let's make sure we have the right team members. Let's make sure, we have the right narrative. Let's really figure out, what is our end game here, where we want to be 18, 24 months from now. And obviously for every artist, it's different. There's some people who want to go out and be road warriors and be on the road all the time. And, you craft your plan around that. A lot of the artists I tend to work with are touring. They do tour heavily, and luckily for me, I've got a lot of critics darlings, so that's wonderful. But you do have to, you can't take that for granted. You still need to figure out what is the story we're telling with this particular release, and where are we trying to take this. You have to be several steps ahead, of your own strategy, really, of like, okay, well, if I can achieve these things, if I can get this baseline of success, whether it's certain, radio looks, press looks, touring looks, etc. Well, if I get those things, then what's the next step, and the next step after that? So I think it's a constant. Maybe a canvas is the wrong word. Actually, it's sort of like a dry erase board, right? It's like you're writing down what you're going to do, and then you go, oh, okay, well that worked, but that didn't work. Let's erase that, and now let's try this. And like, I think if you get far ahead enough of a campaign, and you know what you're doing, I think you can have some level of success. Now, what level that is, who knows? I mean, some things go supernova and some don't, but you still got to put the same amount of work into it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And defining that success, really only you and your artist can do it at the end of the day.
Right.
Like what's realistic, what is obtainable. I mean, I remember working a project once, and, it was a unique project. It had its challenges, but I can honestly say we all put all our best effort into it. It couldn't have gone any better. We couldn't have done anything differently, really, than what we did. And in some respects, that felt really good, to kind of like own that and say it. was it a huge success? No, it depends on how you define that, but defining it,
well,
I think
if you,
yeah,
I'll tell you how I define it.
sure.
How I define it, if you put all your hard work in, and you hope it's going to get to whatever level you're hoping to get to.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't get there, if you've set it up where the artist is still relevant, still has a touring career, the arrow is still going up, you're still in the game.
Yeah.
Then maybe it's not that cycle, maybe it's the next one, or maybe it's the one after that. I mean, that was the thing back, and I know you and I have riffed, on the side here about just, development of artists and label development. I mean, that was one of the things that attracted me, back in the day to working with, like, working at Chrysalis or IRS, or to a label like A&M, is that they would look at an artist and go, look, we just believe in this band and we believe in this music, and we're going to get 5-6 records in, and we're going to spend money on this and go after it. But, like, we believe something's going to happen eventually because we hear it and we like it. And what a great way to operate.
Yeah.
I mean, now it's like, we're talking about analytics, we're fighting against all the DSPs. We're talking about the kind of money that's going on at radio, which, I mean, payola, as you and I know, has been active for ever in one form or another. But, like, when you come from the perspective of, I really like this artist, or I really like this band, and I want to work hard to make this go better. And you get the right people and you catch the right breaks, and that's where it can be just incredibly rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah, and thankfully there's a lot of artists out there that are 3 or 4 or 5 records in, to put some time and energy in. You look at somebody like Brandi Carlile, it's like, put a lot of time and energy in, to get to a point where people were starting to pay attention. And sometimes you hit that tipping point where somebody like her or Jason Isbell or somebody of that nature can go out and play and tour for the next 20 years,
right.
Continue to put records out, have an audience. But both of them,
because isn't that the ultimate reward for the artist, right?
Yeah, I think so.
They continue to stay relevant. They continue to work at their craft. They continue to be a working musician, right? And if you are helping that to go the right way, you're doing something good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you could argue and say too that if they didn't have those 3 or 4 records or experiences, whatever that collective individual experience per artist is, I mean, they probably wouldn't necessarily be able to even manage those heights when they arrive. I mean, whether it's stage presence, just time in on the road, being able to perform at a high level in a moment. That kind of stuff is it gives me hope towards, a path that artists can carve out and still succeed at, even with some of the challenges and limitations and just harshness of the industry, the record industry in particular.
It can be very, very unforgiving. I mean, I still remember when I worked at Arista, there would be certain bands, you'd see them like come into the office and it'd be like their big moment, like, we got signed to Arista and we're coming in and we're making the rounds, and like you could just tell by the level of excitement in the building that you're like, I'm never going to see these guys again. Like, nobody cares. And it was disheartening, and sitting there as sort of at that point, a very junior person watching this happen to artists, you're like, oh my God, this is a horror show. It's a meat grinder.
Yeah.
But and that's why, like these artists, they need good teams around them to, I'm not one of these people, I think record labels are evil or any of that bullshit.
Yeah, no,
but like, but you got to navigate it. You got to navigate it and try to get it, figure out how do you make that a good relationship for the artist, and how do you make it work for the label where, okay, this is a good relationship for both parties.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work.
No, it doesn't. But if you go into it with that mindset of like, let's be good to each other. Yeah, let's find a healthy balance. Teamwork, and that is really hard to cultivate, but super crucial in order to
oh God.
I mean, look,
they they want to sell records or streams, whatever we're talking about here, and they want to succeed. So you have to look at it from their and again, that's why I think me working at record labels for so long, especially with my management clients, when I sit with a record label and they sort of lay out for me, especially at the beginning of a campaign, this is what we want to do. Like I can quickly identify, okay, this person's great at their job. I just need to leave them alone and get the hell out of their way, and pat them on the back when they do a great job. Right. This person over here, I don't know if they're checked in. So how do I try to get them around and get them excited about my artist, or do I need to go get some outside help to sort of patch this up? I think the sooner as a manager you sort of realize what you're dealing with, and because no label's perfect.
Right.
They're not. There's at every label you always have wonderful people who will fight to the death for you. Right. And then you have other people where you're like, hey, how's that nap on the hammock going? But, so you just the quicker you realize that, the better.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big part of the job. Like knowing who your advocates are and who aren't, how to navigate that and how to supplement it. Cause it's not a given, And any level, whether you're talking about a label, they're just easy to as a go-to, but publishing, definitely. Absolutely. I used to have those conversations where I'm like, hey, can I get an idea what you guys are up to over at Publish? Well, we're pitching. I was like, can you kind of tell me, just give me some information of what you pitched to? I'm just curious. Right, I just want to know. I'm not trying to hold you accountable directly. I'm not saying you're not doing anything, but can I have an idea of what you're doing? It was always, there's just times where you're like, okay, how do I augment this?
And there's some agents. Yeah, there's some agents who will remain nameless for the sake of the innocent, who just will continue to try to put things in certain rooms because those are their friends, and not open it up to other offers or not explore it. And you're like, my artist doesn't want to play there. What about these 4 other rooms? Right. Like you got to, as time marches on, do your homework. Make sure you know what the options are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's maybe not holding people accountable as much as just making sure you're exploring every option and no stone is unturned. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's clearly a lot of stones to turn over in all aspects of everything we're talking about. I mean, it's just, it's consuming in a good way. If you're up for the challenge and you're up for the, I keep referring to this as a fight, but I mean, it is, I'm actually a very peaceful person. So, but no, you really, I mean, you have to, every single day with every artist, there's a new challenge on some aspect, and you have to figure out what is the best path forward that is true to what your artist is about, is representative of what they're about, and is going to be serving the greater good of what you hope will be a lifelong career.
Right. Yeah. And so it's less about maybe the struggle or to fight from a certain perspective and more just being the advocate,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You're the conduit and the advocate on their behalf, against and with ultimately all these other elements, whether it's booking agents, publicists, publishing opportunities, all of that. It does require why do we do this to ourselves? It's a really challenging job.
A good
I just talked myself out of this.
I lose that. All right. Yeah, we quit. That's it. We're done. And scene. Right? Yeah, exactly. No, it's like we do it because we love it. But but I think anything you love like this, and when you do get involved in, I think, a managerial role with an artist, it's very personal, Yes. And I know when things happen to the artist I'm working with that I feel, is a slight or wrong, or I get upset. I get upset on their behalf, and I don't go, oh, I'm not flippant about it. I mean, I think it's, and you can't be to do this job the right way. Like, I think you really have to be in the trenches with who you're working with, share the same ideas of strategy and the same level of passion, or why are you there?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Yeah, it's one thing I learned pretty late in my management career, but because every now and then you'll be like, yeah, we should do this. Label wants us to do this, or
right.
We should do this for this person because it's going to lead to this. But I
Mm-hmm.
tried really hard to kind of go take a break and go, okay, would I do this? Am I asking,
right.
this person who I, admire and respect and work with and ultimately want to see obviously succeed and care about, to do something that is like putting them, in an uncomfortable position for themselves.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that was definitely kind of a moral conundrum, a few times. And I've known a few artists, directly and indirectly, that have said no to certain things that would have, potentially, had a different type of impact on their career, but was maybe just a step too far for who they felt they were. And, I mean, there's pluses to minuses to that. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. Sometimes you dodge a bullet, sometimes you miss an opportunity. But, at the end of the day, I think, you can't want it more than they want it, but you also can't push them in a position that is uncomfortable for them. You have to find, I mean, hopefully you have an artist. I always like working with artists that are like at least proactive and want to stay engaged. I mean, I think the world is the way it is now requires that in a way that maybe it didn't, 15, 20, 30 years ago. You could be a little bit more aloof or, mysterious or, maybe less involved in certain ways.
I think you can still have that sense. I always,
that's true.
For me, I always like working with artists that have a sure sense of self.
Yeah,
this is who I am. Yeah, this is who I am. This is how I like to operate. And like, I know in this day and age, it's like, hey, get on social media and post 8,000 videos of yourself shilling your stuff, and that's not for every artist. Like, and that's where you have to kind of draw the line and go, look, label X. I know you want, I know you want my artist to do this, but my artist is not comfortable with this. But I'm not going to leave it high and dry. We're going to find other ways to market this record, but that makes sense within who this band or person is, and that's part of the challenge of this is making sure that your artist is protected and but yet the label feels like you're engaging with them and you're marching down the field together.
Yeah, you got to carry the weight somewhere. You just maybe have to kind of redistribute it.
Well, it falls on management, right? That's who's carrying the weight, right? Yeah, it's like, oh okay, I got to. How do these two things fit together? Okay, let's figure it out.
Yeah. I had an artist who just, I mean, it was amazing that he had a phone, let alone, social media. And this is 15 odd years ago when, social media was kind of still in its infancy to some degree, but still requirement. So his workaround was he had his mom post for him. So he talked to his mom. That's kind of fun. Yeah, he talked, because I went to him and I was like, look, I respect your vantage point on this. And personally, I don't know if I disagree, but we have to do what can we do? Like, how can we get creative? And that was his solution. And I applauded him for that. It worked pretty well.
That's actually not a bad solution. I hope she was like putting up recipes or like, oh, look!
Yeah, she was into it.
I went in his room and here's what was in the old toy box. And so, have some fun with it.
Yeah, he'd call her like every other day. I mean, they talked quite a bit. They were really close, so she would basically just tell his stories for him. But I guess ultimately those are the challenges you have to get and that's kind of the way we can get creative. With working with artists is like, okay, if there's not. If this is beyond what we feel comfortable with, or this is an area we're uncomfortable with or not as excited about, how can we look at this differently, or how can we get creative around, the challenges of that?
Exactly.
Like I remember like with touring too, sometimes it'd be like, label wants us to go back out on the road. We can't really play headline shows again. Maybe it'd be good to get in front of somebody else's audience. Who can we go tour with? And it's like, like trying to get creative with how to approach a challenge like that. Ultimately sometimes falls on us,
I feel for agents right now. I mean, I don't know, it seems like most of the agents I talk to these days, whether they're, at a big firm, middle, medium size, small, whatever, they're just being inundated with, hey, can you book my band a 60-date tour and all that? It's like, oh my God. I mean, they're just getting pounded left and right. And, you got to treat your agents well, folks. They work hard. Treat them well. And,
they really do. I mean, and it's like not dissimilar to management where you're putting in all this hard work at the front end. Mm-hmm. And then hopes that it builds and compounds into something that kind of begins to tip and balance later in the game. It's like, for every show they book, for $100, opening slot or whatever, the 10, $25 they make a night doing that, it's a ton of work. Issuing those contracts, getting those opportunities, and then, trying to get you back in. I mean, I feel I was lucky. I mean, my first, kind of experience dealing with an agent was with Frank Riley, and he was so like,
there you go, Frank.
Yeah. So like in it for the long haul, and like,
he's a lifer.
Totally, but he was also like, hey, this is how we do this. You're going to go and do this, and you're going to go out and play your own shows, and they're going to suck. Mm-hmm. And none of us are going to make money. You're going to lose money, but you're going to have a few people there and a few more people next time. And definitely long-term, like strategic thinking. And I remember
look, Frank and, the cats at High Road, it's like spotting a Yeti, right? Because they actually really do give a crap about artist development. And it's not just like, hey, we're going to book you in the Enormo Dome and that's it. No, I mean, there's a reason, Frank's still around and succeeding like he does. It's because of the care he puts into it.
Yeah. And that was so like endearing to me as a young manager. Like I didn't really understand, what to expect from that, but he was very, very kind and offered up really good like insight at times where I had no perspective. Like we got offered first to 3 at a Shed tour. It was co-headlining, and we were doing support. And he's like, "Dude, nobody's going to be there."
Right.
And everybody's going to be at dinner or stuck in traffic trying to get into the parking lot.
We're buying a beer.
Yeah. It's like, don't, the money isn't worth it. You'll get no exposure out of it. And it's just like that kind of insight. If you haven't been down that road before, how do you know?
Right. So true.
Yeah. Those partnerships and having, like you mentioned earlier, a really good team around you can make a world of difference.
Yeah, and for me with like the teams, because you are building a little team for every artist you're working with, and like, they're all very different, because there's different needs with different artists, and like you want, for me, it's always go where the passion is. Mm-hmm. If there are certain agents, certain publicists, certain radio people that you feel are like, I love this artist, I love this record, I want to go kill for this, but hitch your wagon to that. Take that over. I'll take that over name on the door any day of the week.
Yeah, no, that is definitely good advice. Yeah, we were talking the other day about, I think I'd mentioned the thing that always drove me when I was trying to decide, because that's a hard thing to commit to, like commit to work with somebody. Hopefully you like them as a person and have a connection, but you can also share a vision and understand, what a potential trajectory could be. But, the final thing for me was always like, okay, am I going to like am I, like thinking about this at 3 a.m.? Am I going to have some epiphany? Am I going to be passionate enough that this is going to occupy my headspace in a creative manner where I can contribute and be creative with it? And that was always my litmus test. Like, and every now and then I'd do something that, I'll help out with this or, do that. Or I tried doing consulting for a while, and it's just like, I never felt good about it. Like it's
Like,
not that that's bad work, but
that's the thing about NDPR, right?
Yeah.
Because I did NDPR for a while too. And it was very, transactional, where it was like, okay, I'm supposed to care for 4 months. All right. Well, that doesn't feel good, and I did it and I worked my tail off on those projects. But like, for me, it was always about like, I want to build long-term relationships with the people I worked with or work with, and, be in the foxhole with them. And as you said, like have those strange epiphanies at 1 a.m. or when I wake up going, oh, maybe I should call this person, or maybe I should try it this way, or maybe I should look at this a little differently. And like, if you're not, I think if you're not doing that, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a shot in the arm when those things work. I mean, 9 times out of 10, they won't, but man, when they do,
Right.
yeah.
Oh, it's a thrill.
Yeah, it absolutely is. You're like, oh my gosh, the law of averages, the older I get when it comes to stuff like that, and the more experience I get, it's like, yeah, you pitch 10, 20 things, you get 1 or 2 callbacks or conversations going, and maybe one of those sticks for whatever,
Right.
but that's just seems to like be the odds.
Yeah, I always say, like, if you can't, again, not to get, too creative visualization here, but like, if you can't see it in your own mind, like, it's not going to happen.
Right.
Like, if you can't see the path of like, well, I think these outlets should cover it, or I think these people need to pay attention to this record, or I think these are the kind of people we want in the camp. Like, if you can't figure that out yourself, well, then where's that going?
Yeah. And then applying some sort of creative approach to that, always
Absolutely.
seems to be, I had a project didn't have a budget for really, but knew a publicist who was really, a fan of this artist. So I basically went to them and said, look, I can't put you guys on retainer for whatever, 3 or 4 months. I just don't have the budget for it. But if I gave you a list of 20 outlets that I feel like you and I agree that, this feels comfortable to pitch, they might be interested. And I was like, if you personally send these out, I will pay you what I have to do this.
Well,
and
did you get results off that?
I did. Yeah. I mean, basically,
that's incredible.
Yeah. It wasn't anything super huge, and we didn't try to swing real hard. It was one of those things where it was like, let's not make this into a big thing that may or may not really yield anything of any value, because I didn't have that, I was like, I would have if I could, but it just wasn't in the cards. But I was like, what can we do together creatively that isn't asking too much of you, that's real strategic? And if we get 2 or 3
that's
bites,
great.
then we win. It's like you spend an afternoon or whatever, sending out some packages and some emails, follow-ups, and then we, if something happens, great. If it doesn't, at least we went to the people that hopefully would more than likely react to this, and at least we had a shot. Yeah.
Look, I know this is a management podcast, but like, I drawing that PR thing back, like the one thing that makes me ape shit, is when I see publicists, they're like, I'm going to write a press release and we're going to send it out. And I'm like, that's the strategy.
Yeah.
Like that's, maybe you'll get some pickup. Good for you.
Right.
But like, if that's the strategy from the jump, we have a problem. And the same thing applies to, DSPs, or tackling who do you want to tour with, where do you want to tour, how are you trying to get festivals, any of that stuff. Like, if you're just like, let me hit a button or throw it out into the universe and that's going to work, like, you're sadly mistaken. I mean, I always, especially when like launching campaigns with artists, I always feel like, okay, this has to be, this is such a terrible term, like a military strike, right? Where it's like, if we're announcing a record on this day at this time, it has to be turning the lights on. Right. Okay, here we are. We already know we have this press confirmed because we did all this advance work and got them locked in. We know these radio stations are going to care. We have our tour buttoned up. We have all, like, the pieces are on the board, and now we're going. And clearly not everybody operates the same way, but I plenty that do. But like, I really do feel like if you're not operating from that position of strategy every step of the way, it's not going to be good.
Yeah. And honestly, even if you get a great little blip in its isolation, it's not going to carry much weight. It'll be a nice talking point for a hot minute, but it doesn't mean anything unless you have like something to support it, or a few other things kind of happening around it to lift it all up.
Totally.
So many challenges of that nature. But it's what we do.
This is true. So many challenges across the board.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, man, thanks so much for this chat. The one thing we didn't get into that I was hoping to, though, is some of the
I got a minute. I got time. Come on now.
Yeah. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Was some of your work in the political sphere, and you've also did I read that you also helped, I guess at least launch a few venues or do a few like things of that nature? Like
I'll tackle that as a two-parter.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I volunteered. It was during COVID, and I was obviously, things were shut down.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's touring. There were still things to deal with at that time, but so I was still working, but it wasn't the greatest of times for any manager.
Sure.
And I was watching what was happening with Trump and in the country and all that, and I said, I've got time. I need to volunteer my services to do something. And then I fell in with, I think it was the Biden victory, one of the, the Biden campaign things. And I started off by making phone calls because I would do it late at night. Right? I was like, okay, I'll do it like after 10 o'clock when things are kind of quiet and I'm not worried about my own stuff.
Right.
And I started. They put me on the phone banks where I was calling people in Arizona, Nevada, California, like all the West Coast stuff. Wow. And boy, oh boy, like some of the anger that would jump through the phone of some of these people.
Wow.
And you have to be polite and you have to be patient. And
sure.
And I was trying to talk people into why they should not vote for Donald Trump and why they should look at Joe Biden, and did that for a number of weeks. And then I don't know, I must have, taken pictures of somebody or whatever, but they like reach out to me. They're like, well, you're doing really good at this. Like, do you want to like run, do you want to be a moderator and help run this, wow. And moderate the other callers? And I was like, sure. So then I was like the person on, God, what was that? I forget what, we were on Slack. Right. And I was the person coordinating with all the people making phone calls, trying to, and when you did get a voter who like had bad information and you could talk them off the fence.
Wow.
That was brilliant. It was like, it was so rare, but when it happened, you're like, okay, all right. That was, hey, I changed a couple of people's minds.
Yeah.
And how wonderful is that? But yeah, that was more done out of just, let's get Trump out of the damn White House. But
yeah,
did that for quite some time until the election. And then as far as like the venue stuff go, I'll just say I worked with a promotion company that if you Google me, you can find it. And let's just say I did not enjoy the experience and left very quickly.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
fair enough. Yeah, I know in a previous life. Well, actually, just out of college, I was just like, there's artists I wanted to see in Nashville that weren't coming through, so I started promoting. And it was the hardest job. It was like,
oh, it's not easy.
It's like I couldn't, like, all of a sudden you're counting everybody coming through the door, and you're thinking about your guarantee, and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, am I going to make my money back here?
Yeah, and there's several nights where I had to go to the ATM and do some withdrawals. But it's like I had the one thing I'll say about it is, for the most part, I booked stuff I really loved. So I never felt like it was like that was kind of my one barometer. I was like, I'm not going to book something I don't care about, because otherwise I'm just not like, why take the risk?
What am I doing?
Yeah. Right, but. Yeah, I do remember when Jim Pitt moved to Nashville, he started booking stuff at, or wanted to start booking stuff at Belcourt Theaters, our local movie theater.
Oh, that's right. I forgot he did that for a minute.
Yeah. And I think it was Kenny Weinstein put us in touch. He's like, you should talk to Chris. Chris has done some shows. And I was like, dude, the same thing with like Bob Malloy at Belmont. I was like, dude, you don't want to do this.
Don't do this.
Like, you got a good job. You're having fun. Like, this is going to be hard. Right. You're going to lose money.
Why ruin it, Jim? Yeah.
He did it anyway and did pretty well with it. But I think he kind of reached his point too, where he's like, this is a lot harder than I don't want to speak for him, but yeah, I think it was, promoting's really
being
hard.
a concert. being a concert promoter is not an easy, and obviously in New York, obviously you have Live Nation, you have the Barry AG folks, and they're kind of going toe to toe. And then you've got a plethora of really good and some not so good indie promoters here that are going neck and neck at it. And I mean, God, that is a tough job, and it's sort of like placing bets. It's like a craps table, right? You're placing bets all over the place, and like, is one of these going to hit, or am I just like making bad bets? But the promoters that are really good at that, and I think we know, especially in New York, the rooms that are booked well and get quality artists, and look, as a manager, it's like you want to work with those guys, right? It's like, they're gonna pay my artists well, they're gonna take care of my folks. This is going to be a good experience from top to bottom. I mean, again, there's plenty of promoters out there that do not operate that way, but the ones that do, you got to keep going back to and leaning into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a firm believer sometimes crossing those lines, trying putting yourself in a different role, or if experience opens up that opportunity, it definitely shines a different light on things. Like, immediately when I started working with agents and had artists on the road, anytime I went to a show, I always wanted to talk to a promoter. I always wanted to just go out of my way. Actually, one of the things that fascinated me the most is, and I so appreciated this, a friend of mine was a promoter in Nashville and did these outdoor shows, and the Flaming Lips played, and Wayne thanked him personally from the stage. And I know he kind of does that every night, right? But it was just like, man, what a amazing thing to do. Like, to hear your name called out in front of like 7,000-8,000 people, and in a very honest and sincere way of saying, thank you for bringing us here and taking good care of us. I mean, oh my gosh. Like,
but good on Wayne for doing that, and good on the promoter for treating him right. But there's great promoters all over the country, all over the world. I mean, there's some really, boy, oh boy, there's some really crappy ones. But yeah, and that's why, when you're routing a tour for your artists, that's another one of those skill sets. You got to be like, okay, does this room sound good?
Yeah.
Are the people cool? Am I getting what I'm worth guarantee wise? Like, what are the splits? I mean, and then there's the other end of it, the promoter end we're talking about, where, there's some promoters that will try to undervalue you and sell you short, and you got to, I mean, look, I just turned down a Glastonbury offer for one of my artists because I was like,
wow,
I was like, I'd love them to play Glastonbury, but I don't like what you're offering me here. So, maybe next time.
Yeah.
And that's where, you have to do that evaluation of where is this at and what am I getting out of it?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And if they really want them, and eventually they'll come back to you with something, hopefully.
Right.
More.
You hope. It's like, and like and the festival game, I mean, again, we could go off on that forever, but like,
sure.
The independent promoters, I mean, look, there's people doing some great work here in New York, and depending on what your musicality is, what your field is, there's plenty of places to play.
Yeah. Yeah. Grateful for that, especially coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, thank God a lot of these clubs survived. Good Lord.
Yeah. Oh man. Indeed. Well, thanks for going into a little bit of overtime and covering all this.
Oh, come on. My pleasure.
I want to thank Keith for taking the time to chat today, and thanks to you as well for listening in. You can find us in all the usual places at Tough Love Pod. That's TOUGHLOVEPOD. And you can find me at chris@toughlovepod.com. For now, be well, trip up, get back up, and let's all learn as we go. Until next time.